Hosni Mubarak held power for nearly 30 years and, like many Arab leaders of his time, made his country a personal fiefdom. He placed friends and family in positions of power and appeared to be grooming his son to succeed him. Until 18 stunning days in early 2011, when it all came to an end. His vice president announced the news.
In these difficult circumstances that Egypt is going through, President Mubarak decided to resign from his post as the president, and he requested the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces to run the affairs of the country, and God help us all.
Within months, he was in a courtroom cage on trial for the killing of protesters. He was sentenced to life in prison. It was an almost unthinkable political end to the man who was the only president most Egyptians knew. Yet the presidency was not something he had sought. In 1981, Islamists killed President Anwar Sadat, in part for making peace with Israel. Vice President Mubarak was by his side. The assassins propelled him to the leadership of the country. During the 1973 Arab-Israeli War, Mubarak had risen to fame as head of Egypt's Air Force. That made him unlikely to carry forward the peace deal with Israel. But with huge financial incentives from the United States, he remained committed to the treaty. At the same time, he mended relations with Arab nations that had shunned Egypt for its overture. To keep the peace at home, he instituted emergency laws, an emergency that lasted for decades. Hussein Abdul Razak is the former head of the left-wing Tagamu party.
The most important objective he sought is to achieve stability and security.
That security came at a price, with rights groups and opponents claiming widespread torture. On the economic front, Mubarak promised reforms, but poverty and unemployment grew. When Islamic extremists killed Egyptians and foreign tourists, Mubarak cracked down. But in doing so, he also marginalized moderate Islamists, only increasing their grassroots support. According to political analyst Hisham Qasim, Mubarak, more than anything, lacked a vision.
We're not talking only about somebody who was really the charge d'affaires of a country for 30 years and practically did nothing. Okay, he was like the Mr. Night Shift, out there to hand over the place to the morning shift. This is his legacy. But he was ultra corrupt, ultra corrupt.
Some say it was the grooming of his son Gamal that proved the final straw. Saeed Sadiq of the American University in Cairo.
If you look at, especially since this succession project started, that his son would take over, the popularity of this regime declined tremendously.
Sadiq says the middle class, hurt by Mr. Mubarak's policies, led the revolt against him. But even during his trial, he had his supporters. Mr. Mubarak saw himself as a paternal figure. It's an image he played upon in his final days in office. But his defiance only reminded the protesters of his refusal to do more for his country while in power. Elizabeth Arrott, VOA News, Cairo.